أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ألهاكم التكاثر حتى زرتم المقابر كلا سوف تعلمون ثم كلا سوف تعلمون كلا لو تعلمون علم اليقين لترون الجحيم ثم لترونها عين اليقين ثم لتسألنها يومئذ عن النعيم صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله الكريم.
Son, thank you so much, Brother Abbas. Appreciate it. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our session today. Today, we're going to be talking about navigating religion, culture, and society in our daily lives. We are joined by Syed Asad Jafri today. Thank you so much. We're going to talk about how living in the West as Muslims can be challenging. And today's event is presented to you by GIY, GSS, and JTC. And we hope this interactive Q&A is something that is beneficial to everyone attending. And we have some preliminary questions that we're going to be starting off with. But if anytime you have any questions, feel free to use the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen and submit your questions. And inshallah, we'll try to get to them as soon as we can. So without further ado, Brother Syed Asad, if you can just turn on your video, and inshallah, we'll begin.
I'm not able to turn my video on. It's telling me that you have to allow me to do that.
Sorry, just give me 1 second there.
Yeah, sure.
Perfect. I think you should be able to.
We're good. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وبه نستعين وهو خير الناصر ومعين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. First of all, let me express my gratitude to the GIY, JSS, and JTC group for including me in such an important program. It is a massive topic and one that really requires a series of discussions. But I think that given the name of the event and the few keywords that I picked up, I think I know what the organizers are trying to accomplish in this event, and I'll do my best to initially just speak a few words on this topic alone. And then I believe by 2:30, 2:35, we'll go ahead and tackle some of the questions. So just bear with me for about half an hour. I'll have a few thoughts to share. First of all, I think that this is going to be a very fluid discussion over the years. I think that when our parents arrived, assuming that the majority of us are immigrant families, meaning our parents or at least our grandparents came from a different part of the world, and they came here to settle in, and we're still trying to figure out, the issue of identity. And really, I think what this topic is pointing towards is this identity crisis, into assimilation and into isolation, into all these things, integration. But I think that, initially we have to understand that there may not be a clear-cut answer in terms of what our identity is, and that's okay. There are some people that relate to certain aspects of their culture, their identity, their religion differently. When it comes to our parents' identity, for example, I come from a typical Pakistani background. My parents came from Karachi to Toronto in the early 70s. I, of course, was born and raised here, as many of you know. But if I was to ask my parents about their identity, they would, with the utmost certainty and, just pride, say that we are from Pakistan, we're Pakistani. If you were to ask me, it would be a little bit more of a different discussion. If you were to ask my kids, it would be even more of a different discussion. It's not a clear-cut black and white issue anymore, and that's okay. There's nothing to be too excited about. We don't need to box ourselves or limit ourselves to one avenue of identity, which means that we should be able now to fit in, adapt, and really adopt where we live, in this case, the West. That's point number one. Point number two, and more importantly, is that let's not give, and I'm not saying anyone here is doing that, I just want to make sure that I'm on the right page. Let's not give others too much investment in our identity. I feel like we're confused sometimes as Muslims in the West, how to practice my religion, how to present my religion, how to feel about my religion. I think partly simply because we've been made to feel like we are the other and we are different and we are, isolated. And so we've given a little bit too much airtime, if I can use that word, and a little bit too much of our land to someone else to come and build on. For someone else to come and dictate to me how I should feel, how I should believe, how I should be, who I should be, and then my acceptance based on their conditions on me alone. So whether or not it's the fact that if you wear hijab, then you seem backward. If you have a little bit of a thicker beard, then you're an extremist. If you pray at school, let's say, for example, or you're one of those Muslims, right? And so, we've, in the process now, we've kind of allowed our own inferior complex to be a tool used by others to manipulate our internal kingdom. To sit there and tell us that, like, who are you, what are you? And so we're always playing catch up, or we're always trying to kind of mend and blend and kind of adapt and kind of change so the person in front of me can quote unquote accept me. And so there's massive confusion. I've had this conversation about identity, I think easily now, it's been over a decade with different generations, right? Those who were, let's say, 10 years ago are now 25 and they're still struggling with who am I? It's a lifelong, like I said, fluid, dynamic discussion that will evolve, right? As you get older, as you get a little bit more mature, and as life kind of presents itself to you, whether it be in the form of you being a parent or a spouse or both, or whatever the case may be, you will begin to realize who am I now will change. The third point I want to make, and the most important point I want to make, is that sometimes I don't think we understand the role of Islam in all this. The Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He arrived and he was born, of course, in Mecca. He was one of the Meccans, right? The Quran says, وَهُوَ الَّذِي بَعَثَ فِي الْأُمِّينَ رُسُلٌ مِّنْهُمْ يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ, all that is there. But the point is that we have raised a prophet, فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رُسُولًا مِّنْهُمْ. We have raised a prophet who is amongst them, who is with them, not from a different country, city, planet, galaxy. No, he's a Meccan like you are. Sometimes I think we believe as Muslims, especially of those who believe that we need to do everything we can to fit into this society, we believe sometimes that Islam came to take over every society that it entered. And that the first notion is convert everybody. Make everybody a Muslim, make everybody a Shia, make everyone do matam, everyone do majlis. Hold on one second. That wasn't the case at all. And let's go all the way back to the Prophet's time, in this era of Jahiliyyah, as many of you know. He lived amongst individuals who lived a chaotic life. They weren't ignorant, they weren't illiterate, but they were animalistic in their lifestyle, meaning they were instinctive human beings. There was no sort of filter, no reason, no thought, no rhyme why they did what they did. No structure in their life, no organization in their life, no hierarchy, no selflessness, sorry. And so along comes the Prophet of Allah now, having built trust for 40 years, and establishes this deen of Islam. And with it now presents a culture by itself. One thing that I think that we forget is that Islam has its own culture, right? And you can identify as a Muslim to be your own culture. Now, yes, the clothes you wear, the food you eat, the language you speak, it might be geographical. That's fine. But who you are, you belong to the Islamic culture. Now, that Islamic culture had come into the Meccan society, not looking to dominate the society, not looking to convert every household. It was never an either you're with us or you're not. It was this idea of presenting another path of salvation. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu istajibu lillahi wa lirasuli idha da'akum lima yuhyikum. O you who believe, answer the call of Allah and the Prophet when they invite you towards life, a path of life. So if you look at the sheer way Islam was initially introduced to the masses in Mecca, you'll get your answer right there. It was a very gradual, a very slow, a very meticulous, monotonous introduction of Islam into the people of Mecca and Medina, right? Alcohol was not made haram until a good 13, 14 years in Medina after the Prophet announced his prophethood. Okay? Interest, for example, is one of the last discussions in the Quran to be revealed to the Prophet, a good 20 years after the first revelation. So this was never about the idea that we're going to come in, we're going to dominate, we're going to convert, we're going to make sure that if you're not a Muslim, then you're dead to us. Never. It was never the case like that. So the approach was a three-prong approach. Okay? And follow me, guys, a little bit carefully here. Obviously, the Prophet of Allah now introduced a lifestyle that included everything. Remember, Islam is a complete and encompassing system. From individualism to collectivism to society to politics to economics to you name it. It talks about everything from, when to cut your nails to how to make sure you set up your will to how to treat your employees to who to marry. It's not a religion of Fridays. It's not a religion of a season. It's not just a month of Ramadan. Entire and all-encompassing religion. So it came in looking to do one of three things or all three things. Follow me very carefully. In working with existing cultures, now this is where now I get to the crux of my discussion. In working with existing cultures, Islam took a three-prong approach. Either it rejected existing norms in that culture, or it embraced existing norms in that culture, or it refined and improved existing norms in that culture. Let's give examples. Let's stick with the Prophet of Allah. Entered Mecca, you know and I know very well historically the era of Jahiliyyah, that era of a chaotic lifestyle in the Arabian Peninsula, and specifically in Mecca, was dictated by three main acts. Number one was idol worshiping. Okay. Is rampant. In fact, Mecca was not only the hub of worshiping idols, it was the hub of selling and trading idols as well. Abu Sufyan had an immense problem with the Prophet of Allah, his staunch enemy, for two reasons. Not only are you attacking my worship, but you're ruining my business as the leader, quote unquote, and the financial benefactor of the fact that people would come far and wide to the Kaaba to buy and sell idols. Now here comes this Muhammad Amin telling us to destroy the idols. Wait a second now. You're ruining my worship. You're ruining my pocket as well. Number one was worshiping. Number two was disrespecting women, right? Burying daughters alive. Not everybody. Only certain tribes did it. Not everyone buried daughters alive. Only certain tribes did it. And number three was open bloodshed. Okay? Open war. Common bloodshed for no apparent reason. These were three that kind of created the framework and the structure of the era of Jahiliyyah. And sometimes at least me growing up, in madrasa, listening to lectures, it was always presented that everything about the Arabs back then was very, very horrible. Everything was. They were disrespectful, they were ignorant, they were chaotic, they were cavemen, they were disorganized, they were disgusting, but the reality is there was a lot of greatness in them as well. Okay? The Prophet of Allah, quote unquote, embraced and used to benefit the deen. So let's give examples of all three of these the different dimensions. The first one is an outright rejection of a norm. As I mentioned, social norms was either you're burying a daughter alive or you're seeing women as a commodity to trade. Okay? The idea was that women in general were a deficiency back then. You couldn't go to war as a woman, you couldn't work as a woman, so you were useless to men. right? And so, they would include women sometimes in the spoils of war. You have your swords and your shields and your horses and your weapons, and you have the women as well. Buy and trade women like they were, like I said, commodities. And then some tribes will go even so far that when news of a daughter was given to them at birth, the Quran says their face would turn black, meaning what? That they would, of course, be upset. And many would, of course, take that extreme measure to bury them alive. The Prophet outright rejected that, okay? And then he, of course, slowly but surely introduced rights of women in Islam, the maqam of a mother, how to treat your wife, how to raise your daughters, etc., etc. That's one example of outright rejection of a social norm. The one that was an example of the embracing of a culture, one thing that was quite cultural in Arabs was their memory, okay? They were individuals who had sharp memories, okay? They had, for example, 30 tribes' names memorized. They would tell you your name, your father's name, his father's name, etc., all the way going up to maybe 20, 25 generations, okay? They had very, very strong minds. Unfortunately, it was used in wrong areas, but very strong minds. Part of the reason why the Quran was one of the miracles of the Holy Prophet was because it would instigate some thought inside of these strong-minded Arabs. Now, how did the Prophet embrace this idea? One of the more powerful reasons why the Quran was so successful in its spread and its avoidance from distortion is the fact that the Prophet of Allah would use the memory of the Arabs to ensure that the Quran would not be lost in terms of its wordings, okay? So for example, he would get a revelation, the Prophet would, about a certain verse, and then he would summon two different groups of people. He would summon 10 individuals on one side and 10 on the other, all right? The first 10 were people who were in charge of memorizing the verses. So memorize them, memorize the fatah, the kasra, the dhamma, memorize everything, the proper pronunciation, the ha, the qafs, all that is there, right? Memorize it, understand the tafsir of it. The Prophet would explain the tafsir and the hidden meanings behind the verses. And then he would send these 10 individuals to go out and spread this knowledge, but don't lose the memory and the hifz of that verse. The other group of people were the katibin. They would write down the verse, on rocks, on animal skin, whatever they could find back then. So part of the spreading of the Quran and the protection of the Quran was the memory of the Arabs. The Prophet embraced it. The third example is that a social norm that the Prophet came to see that this is a norm now, this is something that is behavioral inside the Arabs, that I can come, refine a bit, and use for the benefit of the deen. And that was their loyalty. They were extremely loyal individuals. They lived and they died by the tribe. You were known for your tribe. The first question they would ask you is, what tribe do you belong to? Right? If one person was disrespected in the tribe, the entire tribe would come and avenge that disrespect. Same idea. If somebody was killed in a tribe, there would be a tribe versus a tribe battle. Right? You were known for your tribes. The reason why the Prophet of Allah was never touched physically, in terms of at least torture or death even, was because he belonged to the Bani Hashim tribe, and that tribe was one of the strongest ones. Abu Talib, his uncle, was one of the most revered, respected, and feared individual. Not that he was a tyrant, but he was a very powerful man who had resources that no one else had. So they would go to him and say, look, can you please explain to your nephew, don't do this, don't preach this message, right? And that's why the loss of Abu Talib for the Prophet was so difficult, because this was his pillar, right? But that loyalty was amazing. Now the Prophet says, look, that loyalty, take that loyalty, but instead of being loyal to your tribe in good, bad, and ugly, become loyal to the cause. Become loyal to your Creator. The same vigor and same passion, same resolve you have, let's say, for example, to strengthen your tribe, to defend your tribe, to talk good of your tribe, to truly propagate your tribe. Take that same process, defend God, propagate God, elevate yourself. Okay. The point was that Islam never came in to wipe out the entire culture of the Meccans. It came to do its best to harmonize, up until a certain point now, don't get me wrong now, to harmonize and sort of fuse itself into an existing culture. Okay, where there wasn't an attack on the Sharia, the code of law, Allah's jurisprudence was not to be touched, right? Not at all. We have stories that I often share. Individuals, tribes would come to the Prophet in the beginning of the mission and say, look, we will accept your mission. We have a massive tribe. We're very, very wealthy. We're very influential. All of this is yours. We'll accept Islam as an entire tribe, but we want to worship our idols every so often. We'll pray your salat, we'll give your khums, we'll give your zakat, all that, fine. But we want the flexibility that when we feel like it, to not lose sight of our idols. The Prophet said, no, sorry. It'd be nice, yeah. I mean, if you're opening up a business, for example, it's a horrible example. You're starting a movement, for example, you need followers. Here comes a tribe that's quite influential that would really boost your image amongst the locals. You might say, look, you know what, fine. I'll give you a little bit of that, you know, as long as the majority is Islam. The Prophet says, no, I'm not going to sacrifice a pure end for an impure means. Not going to do it, right? So at that moment, there's no negotiation, okay? But the fusing is important. Now, you take that Meccan culture and let's now bring it to today in Western culture. Let's apply the same principles, guys. 3 of the main components to the culture, right? Either we reject certain social norms, or we embrace social norms, or we outright refine or attempt to change those norms for the better. Not anyone else. You guys know me well enough in the JCC community to know that I always talk about change from within, right? To make sure that we understand the fact that I'm not looking to change anybody else. I'm looking to change myself. Okay, so there are social norms and there are cultural values right now in this Western world, in this country of Canada, that are beautiful, that cannot be found in the Muslim countries. But there are some social norms that have to be rejected by the Deen, and then there are those norms that can be used. Okay, their sense of justice, their sense of fairness, their sense of management, their sense of doing things in a very, very systematic way. Okay, the efforts on time management, the efforts on budget management, all these things that are already here present can be embraced and used to elevate the Deen. But obviously, you know, the idea of individualism, the idea of, you know, this animalistic freedom, do whatever you want, doesn't matter of the repercussions, that stuff, of course, has to be rejected by the Deen, okay? So therein lies the battle between what portion of this culture can we take and embrace, what portion of it can we, and that's where the Sharia comes in and draws a very, very fine line now, okay? A very solid line between the two. That, look, this is not, if this leads you towards sin, you are not to do it. And that leading towards sin is up to you as the individual who is responsible for you to identify which of these norms now is going to be something that I should embrace and I can embrace. And that is your battle, especially as my youth out there, okay? There are things right now that are quote unquote norm for you guys around you, people your age, online, for example, that is disastrous in the eyes of Islam. And therein lies your submission and your choice and your faith. Either embrace that norm, right, and deal with the consequences, or fight it. And deal with the fact that I will be a little bit distinct from everybody else. You know, if everyone else is going down this stream, I'm going up the other way, and you have to be okay with that. Now, I wish I can go on and on, but I don't want to. I want to give enough time for the questions. I only have about 5 minutes left. I want to make sure by 2:30, 2:35 I'm done. But this idea that, you know, Islam is coming in now and it's either all of the West or all of Islam is not correct at all. I want that misconception to be removed. There are things in the West that are great, that are great and that can truly, truly assist the Deen and can make us better human beings. Okay. And we have to learn to embrace those things and learn from them. Okay. I'm not here. No one here to convert my neighbor, to convert, my barber. No, of course not. No, of course not. There's a sense of tolerance that needs to be adopted that sometimes we don't find in quote unquote Muslim countries, let alone in the West. Right. I've seen things, I'm sure all of you have as well, that just speaks humanity. And it's a shame that those exact same things that you find here, you find the complete opposite, like I said, in Muslim countries. So it's not either I'm a Muslim or I'm a Canadian, I'm a Muslim or an American. No, not at all. You can be a little bit of both. It's okay with that, right? There is a whole idea and a whole notion of, being part of your culture and being part of where your homeland is, having respect for your homeland. Now, to a certain degree, doesn't mean that you assimilate to the point where you have no idea where your Islamic values are gone and your Canadian values start, but there can be a balance, there can be an integration possibly, where you take the best of this culture and you still hold on to your culture, where you're still a Muslim, but you still are, a law-abiding, respectful citizen, let's say, for example, of this country or the city, wherever you're from. It's possible to achieve both. That's the struggle, though. The struggle is, where do I go, where do I stop, and where do I start? And it's an ongoing struggle, no doubt. But this notion that, I have to choose between the two cultures, not true whatsoever. You live in this country, you have the passport in your hand, you benefit, let's say, from the healthcare, all this stuff, right? At the same time, Islam does not say for you to reject, the country you live in. No, of course not. Of course not. There is a respect of the law of the land that's there. But like I said, please don't get me wrong, to a certain extent. And that extent sometimes, literally, guys, is case by case. Music is a very, very normal part of this society. It's everywhere. It's in marketing. It's in shows. It's it's used for therapy. But there are avenues of music inside the deen that is qat'an 100,000% haram, right? So I'm not saying, because I'm a Canadian, I can go ahead and listen to half this music, half that. No, of course not. Right? No, of course not. The Sharia and the law of God trumps everything else. Okay, so let me stop there and let me use that as a muqaddama, as a little bit of introduction. And if we can go ahead and open the floor for questions, it's already 2:30, then we can begin that, inshallah. That way we can maximize the time for the questions. I'm going to use my eyes now, if that's okay.
For sure. Thank you so much, Syed Asad.
Thank you,
and I think that was a great insight into how, at the end of the day, you have to stay loyal to your deen and kind of think about the 3-step how you can lay that out. And you spoke about music. There is the first question that I want to start with. So it says that we are a young couple. We happen to have a few Indian friends. There's obviously a cultural difference between us and them. Recently, they have gifted us a music system. I want to express to them certain limb that we follow as Shia Muslims. However, I personally find this very hard to convey the message to them. Could you please share some advice or tips on how to have those conversations with non-Muslims?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it probably sums up the theme of the entire program today. The first thing is, and these are answers you guys have heard 1,000 times, and they've almost become cliche, and everyone wants a new approach, and sometimes there's no new approach. There's a matter of you applying those things that you've already heard. I need to apply as well what I've heard. Is the first thing is that before approaching non-Muslims, do we understand the reality? For example, the topic of music is a hot one. I mean, it's constantly being asked, and do we understand our approach to music in general? It is not a black and white issue at all, not even close. It's not that all music is haram or all music is good. No, nor is it, subjective that, okay, for this person, for example, hip hop is okay. For that person, for example, R&B is not. This person, for example, techno is okay. No, of course not, right? So if so first of all, let's because once we understand that knowledge, then we understand a little bit of the certainty inside of us. Okay, then we're easily able to convey that message to others without any sort of hesitation. Now, an Indian friend of yours or couple gives you a music machine. Not sure what that means. Is that a karaoke machine? Is that like no idea? But I'll give you an example. We had growing up in Markham, we had Christian neighbors who one time, gave us a bottle of wine as it's a very classic example, as a gift during Christmas time. Okay. Now, my father, he went right back to them and he gave the wine back, and he added our own little, I think it was a box of chocolate or something. And he would say, look, thank you very much. We are Muslim and we don't drink alcohol for this reason. We view alcohol as this. Okay. We appreciate the gift, and we're not even allowed to re-gift it. So my father had to give it back, but very respectfully, he added his own gift and he added a little blurb, and they were very, very respectful. I find that, and this is, by the way, we're talking about maybe 20 years ago. Now I find there to be a lot more tolerance for other faiths and other beliefs. Okay. So if you were to, and if they are truly your friend, then they understand that, music is not a part of your life. That music that is mainstream music, at least not part of your life, then you should be able to say, look, this is the reality of how we as Muslims view music. Because in the Indian non-Muslim culture, music is a huge part of their life. Okay. It's therapeutic. They find it to be, sometimes even spiritual, right? Everything. That's why the Bollywood scene is filled and riddled with the fact that if the movie is no good but the soundtrack is amazing, the movie will fly, because it is a huge part of the Indian culture. So that couple has to be able now to be strong in their own faith and not say, well, look, I'm really sorry, but that apologetic nature, that doesn't need to be there. You can go ahead and give that machine back and say, look, I don't mean to be rude. And obviously if they're close friends of yours, they'll understand. At the same time, now explain to them, if they can, to a certain degree, what exactly is the approach when it comes to music. And there's ample amount of information online. Forget Islam, the negative effects of mainstream music on you, from your nervous system, to your brain, to your heart, to your lifestyle, to habits, everything is out there. Do a little bit of research, equip yourself with the right notes, and then go ahead and give that back. But again, it has to start from us. Forget the Hindu neighbor and the Christian neighbor. Do you understand why this machine is difficult in our house right now?
Sure. Thank you so much. Before I move on to the next question, if anyone who's attending today has a question, feel free to use the Q&A box on the bottom and submit your questions so we can make this as interactive as possible. I'm just going to go on to the next question here. It kind of talks about the LGBTQ community. So someone had a question is, how can we keep respecting relationships with the LGBTQ community? I think it'd be important to be kind and respectful, even if we cannot support the actions.
And there's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing wrong with being kind to any member of the LGBTQ community. Islam is not asking you to spit on them or to, God forbid, be disrespectful to them, or no, absolutely not. There are people, especially in this society that we live in, that, and forget the LGBTQ community, everybody in general, that does not live a lifestyle that we as Muslims agree on, or even support or accept. There's a lot of people out there like that. There are alcoholics, there are fornicators, there are people who are criminals, there are people, all these things, absolutely. And there are sometimes people in your class, at your school. I had a member of that community in my work. When I was at IBM, there's a guy right beside me who would work, who was a member of that, and he knew I was Muslim, and I knew he was that member, and him and I worked on certain projects together. And yeah, there was laughs, there was jokes, he would bring me a coffee, I'd bring him. No one's asking anything. The harshness that sometimes we see, that's a legal discussion. That's not a humanity discussion, right? No one's asking you to slam a door in someone's face or to shove someone on the street, right? I mean, any individual that doesn't share the same lifestyle as you, and you live in this society, you have to learn to live with them. And yes, you show your akhlaq. I mean, we look at the imams, for example, and their approach when it comes to people who, let's say, for example, would ridicule God. Was their approach that, you're this, you're that? No, of course not, right? I mean, yes, there isn't the idea of of sympathy. I'm not talking about the idea of there being an acceptance. And by the way, you know, like a lot of the way that we live our life as Muslims are not accepted by a lot of people in the society. Whether it's the way that our sisters dress, or it's the way that we raise our kids, or it's the way that we do our programs, or it's, you know, the fact that, you know, this is haram and that's haram, and you know, that's okay. But there, you know, if we were to get any sort of, you know, treatment from them that is void of kindness, only because, let's say, for example, I cover my hair, then we would say, look, this person is backward, and the same applies the other way. When there is a sense of influence, then yeah, then you stand up, right? If for example, a muhajjaba sister goes and preaches to some woman on the street who has her hair out, saying, look, you know what, cover your hair, here's a hijab. It's like, yo, back off, what are you doing? Like, that's not what I believe in, right? Then it gets a little bit hostile, then it becomes a debate. Otherwise, hold the door open, salam, hello, how are you? Good, thank you very much. That's it, right? Same idea. If that member of any society is coming to try to force you into that, then you have every right to defend yourself verbally, and of course with wisdom. The Quran says, invite people towards the path if you need to, with wisdom, right? Not you know, disgusting language and not obscene behavior. And it's beneath you as a person of God to treat anyone like that. Doesn't matter where they're from or what society they're part of.
100%. Thank you so much for that. You just kind of talked about the individual approach that we live in the society, where we're focusing on me. And as a result, for some teenagers, it's very hard to cope with hijab. So this is more of an advice. It's what advice would you have for teenagers that are struggling with hijab?
Yeah, and it's a struggle. And, you know, and I find that struggle with hijab, and let me make this one point clear. And I'm sorry if these answers are long-winded, Zain. You know, these are massive questions, and I'm trying to speak a minute here just so I can squeeze in as many questions as possible.
Sure.
But you know, I don't like the fact that when we hear the word hijab, we just limit it to the hijab of the sisters. The reality is that the brothers, you know, they also have a hijab that sometimes they forget. And that is how you look at somebody, how you use your eyes, what you watch, what you hear. All those things are your hijab. You can't make a woman feel uncomfortable with your eyes. You can't watch whatever you want to watch. Doesn't matter if you're a 50-year-old man and you're watching, you know, disgusting shows on Netflix. You know, it doesn't matter, right? That also has to be taken into account. But, you know, overall, what is the consensus when it comes to hijab are our sisters covering themselves up. It's a struggle, and that struggle is sometimes very difficult. And I can see some sisters truly struggling with everything from their image to their friends. So sometimes the biggest battle is their family, right? I know sisters who have no business wearing hijab because their whole family will sit there and ridicule her, and she is. Then I have sisters that, you know, you would expect to wear hijab and they don't. So, you know, as long as the struggle, and please get me, understand, the struggle is this. The struggle is that I need courage and some inspiration to be able now to wear hijab. I'm not questioning hijab in 2020. There are those sisters that say hijab doesn't fit in 2020, that's why I don't wear it. That's one approach. The second approach are those sisters who say, look, of course hijab makes sense to me. I can't bring myself to do it. Two completely polar opposite approaches. The first approach, I'm sorry, is sometimes, you know, to me a cop-out, and I say that with full responsibility. And that's a person who needs to go all the way back to God, understand his rulings, his wisdom, et cetera, et cetera. The second group are the ones that I want to address. Those are sisters that know it's right. They know they have to do it, but they struggle with it. And why hijab? Everything else. We know that salat is wajib on us. We struggle for fajr namaz. We know that khums, for example, is wajib on us. So some of us are making we're making good money. We struggle with paying our khums. You know, why are we stuck on hijab? I think that the advice is that, you know, if you are truly trying to make that leap, and it is a leap, sisters, it's a leap to now, all of a sudden now change everything. Changing your look is very, very difficult. You know, it's not easy. And as a male, I don't pretend to even know what that feels like. You know, I change one thing on my face now, and I feel like, oh my God, does anyone notice what's going on? Imagine covering half of your face and then changing your wardrobe and everything. It's a massive life-changing event. I think, and I'm not the one to give advice as a male, but I think that if you speak to current hijabi sisters, find out their journey. I realize in talking to some muhajjaba sisters that they all have a journey. And sometimes that journey is very, very inspiring. And sometimes when you hear a sister who's always wore hijab tell you, I still find it difficult to leave the house making sure that I'm covered and this and that, blah, 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 then that makes it feel like I'm not the only one. Because sometimes you feel guilty, right? Like, why is it that I can't wear hijab, but everyone else can? Am I not a good servant of God? Is God angry with me? Am I going to be in the hellfire? Then when you hear hijabi sisters tell you, it's a daily struggle for me, it makes it a little bit easier. The first thing I would do is consult, ask advice, talk to as many sisters as you can. The second advice I would give you is start slow, okay? If you can't bring yourself to cover your hair, at least start with modest dressing, okay? So loose fitting clothing, for example, okay? Making sure that, your arms are covered until your wrists, making sure that your pants go down past your ankles, okay? Making sure that in the presence of non-mahram, you at least wear socks. Fine, you can't cover your hair, that's okay. But I find like it's either hijab or it's this dressing, right? And that's not, and that's not the case at all. So, may God bless you guys on this path. It's a very difficult thing to do. And that's why there is a high reward for it. But I would do it in steps. I would first, become a modest individual. From my outer dressing, to my eyes, to my ears, to what I say, to who I hang out with, to how I spend my time. Live a modest life. When you begin to see the benefits of living a modest life, you'll begin to see the benefits of physically looking like a modest person as well. Okay? And that's the advice I have. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much. There is a part 2 to that question.
Sure.
Which is, it stems from, is it true that everything in religion stems from intention? If so, why is hijab forced on young girls rather than encouraged?
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, everything is based on intention. The acceptance of the deed is based on intention. The deed itself has to be done. So the idea that I intend to be a good person doesn't make you a good person. I intend to pray namaz doesn't make you a namazi. I intend to fast doesn't make you a person who's fasting. What does is the fact that you are a good person. You do goodness makes you a good person. You pray on the musalla makes you a prayer. You fast on Ramadan makes you a person who's fasting. So let's do the deed and then attach a good niyat to it, not the other way around. Okay? Good intentions are great. I mean, that's fantastic. And the beauty of God, the grace of God is that He'll even accept that intention to a certain degree, but not to the point where you attach that good intention with a great deed. And then you do those things together, then of course, that's the case. And this idea of forcing, it's not the Sharia. Remember, the Sharia is nothing to be forced upon. Yes, things are made haram, things are made halal. And if we understood God, we would know that those things are made haram and halal for our benefit, not for anybody else. We may not understand at the age of 9 or 10 years old to wear hijab, but if the right environment was created inside the home, the girl from when she's 6, 7, 8 years old will want to wear hijab, will want to make that transition. But if she's coming from an environment where there's music and there's free interaction between men and women, for example, just in terms of like hugging and handshaking, then of course, all of a sudden now hijab at 9 will be very, very difficult. So, it's not as simple as say, if I intend to do something, all of a sudden that should be good enough. No, you have to actually convert that intention into deed itself.
Okay. Thank you. And there's a question that kind of replaces the same thing about the word force. So it's from a youth as well. It's how can youth deal with parents who are constantly emotionally blackmailing them? For example, playing the parent card, saying that they brought us up, so we owe them this and that. When we make a mistake, they say we don't appreciate it and what they have done for us and keep bringing it up, the mistakes all the time. When we do something good, they say it's our right to do it. As children, we don't even feel like doing things for them because it's not appreciated. How can we deal with this?
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to deal with. It's not easy. You have to look at it through, and again, man, this is difficult. You have to look at it through the lens of the parent. Okay. They were parented a certain way at a very, very different era altogether. And they're trying to parent you in this era with those tools. Okay. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. There is a role to play, of course, by the parents. The majority of the role is on the parents. At the same time, however, as children of those parents, we have to understand that that's all that they know. Okay? And if you can somehow focus on, and I know it's very hard, but you know, obviously all of you know the importance of respecting your parents. It's been well documented inside of the deen. You know, if God, like one hadith that always rocks me is that if you want to attain the wrath of God, attain the wrath of your parents. If you want to attain the pleasure of God, attain the pleasure of your parents. That's how close it is to when it comes to parents. So you need to, we all need to, I mean, I'm also, you know, I also have parents, we need to understand that, you know, they want the best for me. I don't even think the blackmail is for them. I think the blackmail is for us. I think that they're just trying to figure out a way to get us to do good, to be better. And yeah, sometimes, you know, and I addressed it inside of my majlis in Marḥūm in the first 10 days. And I try to do that across different workshops, and I'm getting a lot of flack for it, a lot of hate mail for it. But I think at the same time, you know, it's an important discussion as parents that we have to stop doing that. I'm a father of 3, and, you know, like, you know, Surah Luqman has a very beautiful discussion where Luqman now, you know, describes to his son that, look, if you do good or bad, has no effect on me. You do good or you do bad, it affects you. People will look down on you. After a while, you'll no longer be, you know, this person's son, this person's daughter. You'll be you yourself, and you'll have your own image to either repair or to elevate. It's up to you. So I think that, you know, I never liked the emotional blackmail approach. I think that empowering our kids to tell them the benefits of, if you do this, for example, this is what will come out for you, not for me. Forget me. You'll become a better person, right? When you suffer the repercussions of your decisions, you'll suffer, not me. When you benefit from the reward of you'll benefit, not me, right? That'll be your money, and that'll be your home, and that'll be all these things are there. So I think that it's just not the approach that we need to take. I think we need to be very, very open and very, very honest, and maybe empower the children to make them feel like, if you do this, like you know, Luqman does to his son, that an atom of good, an atom of evil, right? It will benefit you, right? You know, we have to stop taking the approach that if you do this, then me as your father looks bad. No, you look bad. It's your image. You're a human being, right? Begin to give them that empowerment that you also are in charge of your own image, right? But, you know, it's hard, man. It's very difficult, and all the power to those kids who take a higher road and don't say a word and zip your mouth and, you know, scream in a pillow and do whatever you need to do. But I would never condone, I would never ask any of you, myself included, to ever raise your voice, to ever talk back. Never, never. And believe me, when you think no one sees it, God sees it. You know, that moment of anger that you swallow can't be physically seen in this world, but God can see it through his lens, right? Inshallah, for that, he'll reward you.
For sure. Thank you so much. And I think there's just like one question kind of related to this. It's, I believe culture is important, but how do we balance between sticking to our own cultural values and the Western culture around us? For many youth, it can be a cause of conflict at home, where they identify more with the Western culture, but the home culture is different. How do we bridge that?
Yeah, so it's you know, it goes back to this massive topic of generation gap, and I have you know, recited a huge lecture series on this. I think that, and I will tell you as a person who has lived his entire life like that, you know, like I said, typical culture of Pakistani home growing up. I was born and raised in this country. You know, whatever language I know in terms of my Urdu, I learned from home, talking to my mother. All I can say to my youth out there, and you guys may not accept this, and that's okay. You don't have to always like everything I say. I think a lot of it is the fact that instead of fighting those cultural things, maybe look to embrace some of them. They're not all evil. There's a lot of greatness inside the culture that comes. For example, the respect that we have for our elders, for example, wearing decent clothes in front of elders, for example, learning a different language, for example. All those things are nothing but good, man. I don't know why we feel like the back home culture is inferior to this great Western culture. There's a lot of corruption here, right? Like, this society has no business telling us, for example, how to raise kids, or how to have a strong marriage, or how to, let's say, for example, build a strong family unit, right? They don't have the best track record here, right? Mind you, back home as well, it's not the best. But I'm saying that there are a lot of things that I have, when I let go of the fight, my own personal story, when I let go of the fight, why are we doing this? Why am I wearing this? What is all this and that? And, and I started to realize that, number one, doesn't hurt me. Number two, there actually might be something that's good in this. And number three, look, their identity, how they identify, and I mentioned in the beginning, was a very black and white identity. This is our culture. This is what we believe in, right? And I don't want my kids to be deprived of that. Okay, so certain foods, certain rituals they do on Thursday night, for example, right? Instead of you rolling your eyes and folding your arms, it's very near and dear to your parents, right? They've been doing it for years and years. Yeah, when you ask them, Mom, Dad, why are we doing this? They may not have a philosophical answer for you, but if it doesn't harm you, right? If it's a matter of the fact that your parents feel like, okay, you know what, I'm now giving this culture to my kids, then embrace it. To the point, of course, of the deen. Where I draw a very, very bright red line is when that culture now interferes in the deen. Okay? So asking you, for example, to have a very cozy relationship with your non-mahram first cousins, that's where we say no, right? Those kind of things, right? So it's a tough balance, but I think that I would like it if the youth, the kids, would kind of take go a little bit more than halfway, right? And don't fight it all the time. Not everything needs to be explained by Quran or Hadith logic, okay? These are things that have been passed down through generations. There has to be some meaning towards it. Your parents may not be able to do it. They'll get flustered when you ask them, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? They'll say, get out, get lost. It's okay, don't worry about it, right? Why is there a piece of, a piece of bread here? Why is there some water here? Why is this thing lit, for example? Why do we recite this 7 times and that 4 times? And, it's not gonna harm you. In fact, you know what? As you do it more and more, you'll begin to really appreciate the culture that's there. And then, of course, it makes you like, to me, it makes you a little bit of a well-rounded, more tolerant person who has a little bit of a worldview. Sometimes, I feel sorry for those who haven't traveled, seen different cultures. They're very, very kind of, they're in a box, and their vision is very, very narrow as well, right? When you travel the world and you begin to embrace different cultures, even your own parents, it kind of broadens your horizon, broadens your view. And that obviously helps you everywhere, and your deen included as well. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for answering that question. I just want to switch gears here a little bit. And there's a question about the vaccine in terms of COVID. So the question is, can you please discuss if there's any literature in Shia school of thought around vaccines, and if the vaccine contains residual human genetic material and aborted fetal cells, supposedly in the COVID vaccine? Is this permissible under Sharia law?
So that's a very specific question. There is a lot of discussion on wiba and waqsun inside of the deen, but it's all Arabic and Farsi literature. I haven't read up on it too much. So that's a very, very fiqhi question, and a very, very specific one that I simply can't comment on. I don't know. It has to be asked of your marja. What the effects of this COVID vaccine might have on you, but there are principles that, of course, the marajih lay behind that we have to apply ourselves. So I'm just going to say I don't know, my brother. I have not done enough research on this topic.
Sure, thank you. And just on that topic, obviously with COVID, a lot of people are more active in the stock market. Someone asked, are there any restriction about stock market investments?
So per se, no, there's no objection. in investing in stocks, because you are now owning a portion of the actual company. You know, provided 3 times that you look at the company you invest in. Obviously, ones that are blatant no's are alcohol companies, companies that perhaps support you know, illegitimate governments. You know, you have to be a little bit careful of that. You know, nowadays there's something called ethical investment. You know, you can look into those things. They have halal investment firms now up and down the US, a couple now in Canada, out west in Vancouver, at least there's one that I know of. So people are, you know, becoming a little bit more conscious investors. So while there isn't per se, there isn't an objection in terms of investment in the stock market, you have to be very careful in where you put your money, okay? So there are some companies and some products that cannot be invested in. For example, alcohol and all parts of it, even a portion of the company, if it deals with alcohol, you are not allowed to invest in that in that company.
Thank you. There's a question about Christmas time. So with Christmas coming up, to what extent should we participate in the festivities? Should we wish Merry Christmas to others proactively rather than reactively as a response? Should we participate in the trees and gift giving? Should we celebrate the holiday, or can we?
Yeah, it's always a tough question, man. Look, every year I get asked this question, okay? We have a Christmas tree in our house. Is it haram? First of all, forget haram or halal for a moment, okay? And it's a very individual discussion. The overall ruling Islamically that I want all of you as families to think about is, and again, it is subjective to each family how they look at it, and it's totally up to you. I'm not going to sit there and tell you don't do that, don't do this, but just a few points to kind of consider. Number one is that is this a point of assimilation? Number one is that, are we now adopting a culture where, you know, we are possibly now entering a situation where maybe we are diluting our culture and kind of entering a culture that already exists. Now, a lot of you will argue, look, Malana, what's the big deal, man? It's a tree, it's a few gifts, you know, this and that. What's the big deal? The kids love it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm, you know, if it's that simple, then that's up to you as a parent. That's fine. If you ask me what I do, I don't do any of that. I don't have a Christmas tree. I don't have any of that. But when it comes to our own Eids, and that's my point number two, is that we have a lot of major celebrations inside of our Islamic calendar. Do we do the same level of celebration for our Eids, for Ghadir, for Fitr, right? Why can't we put lights up outside of our house, let's say during the week of Eid al-Fitr or Eid al-Ghadir, right? It looks weird, Malana, I'm the only one with lights on in the street, blah, 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 this and that. Maybe someone might ask, why do you have lights on? And maybe, just maybe, you know, you can say, okay, this is our celebration, for example, right? In the process now, you're letting your kids know and feel like, look, they have their culture, and they have their celebrations, and we also have our celebration as well, right? And this is our celebration as well. Now, you know, happy holidays, Merry Christmas, nothing wrong with it. I mean, you know, I get my kids to hand out Christmas gifts to the neighbors every Christmas, right? And on there we write happy holidays and this and that, and you know, and there's nothing wrong with it. In fact, if you ask me, that's humanity, right? And you know, in Iran now, some of the senior ulama, they go and they visit Christian homes in the days of Christmas to kind of send their mubarak and their congrats. Now, you know, trees and Christmas lights and this and that, you know, it's subjective. I fear that we're sending a little bit of a diluted message when it comes to Islam, that we don't have our own celebrations. All we are, we're Muharram, we're black, we're crying, this and that. They have all the fun, quote unquote. So they're a fun religion. We're not a fun religion. No, when it's time to grieve, we grieve. When it's time to celebrate, we celebrate, right? So maybe, you know, you can have like a Eid exchange program, right? Eid gift exchange program, for example. You can decorate the entire house if you want during Eid. Why not is a question, right? It's not norm, fine, I get it, but at the same time, why can't we make it norm within our 4 walls? I can't control what happens at the mall. I can't control the Christmas carols that say on the radio, but I can't control the 4 walls inside of us, right? If you do a little bit of both, then again, so be it. But you have to know your kids to know what, you know, what is it that you're trying to achieve. Just pure fun, it's nice, this and that. Up to you. That's fine. But be weary of these small little things, right? And be a little bit cautious of the fact that it's not like in Islam, we don't have our lack of celebrations. We do. I wish sometimes that we celebrated the same passion that we grieved as well, right? And I think that that's the balance that we need to kind of convey to our kids, especially at a young age.
For sure, 100%. Like you said before, I think you have to stay loyal to the deen, right? So before celebrating Christmas, you have to celebrate your own Eid to the most you can.
Right? Yeah. I mean, it's a tough question always for me to answer, and I'm not one. Others might be, and who knows? I might be blasted for this answer, but I'm not one to say that these Western quote unquote holidays are all haram and this and that. No, I mean, is it a little bit far? Yeah, I mean, if your dad dresses up as Santa on Christmas morning, that's a little bit far for me, if you ask me. But like a tree and lights and this and that. Again, I don't know what message you're sending to the kids. That's all.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. And I'm shooting a lot of questions at you. Feel free to take a water break or anything.
That's okay. As long as we're done by what time we're stopping at?
Inshallah, 3:30, so 28 more minutes.
Yeah, no problem. Inshallah, that's fine.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
I have more questions here, but as I'm going through the questions, feel free to leave any questions that you might have thought of now, because we have the session for a bit, 25 more minutes. So feel free.
Yeah. No, I like the way you're grouping the question. You're doing a great job, man. Keep going.
Appreciate it. So the next thing is that someone asked, how do we know what type of music is wrong?
Yeah, so let's tackle music. Man, you guys put everything into one today. Okay, so, all right. Now there's a lot.
Part 2 and 3 too.
Sorry?
There's part 2 and 3 as well.
Okay, all right, okay. Can't wait. First of all, and this is the way that I understand it. Okay, I could be wrong, of course, and others will if you need feel free to kind of chime in if you want. If anyone on this call is an expert in this in this legal ruling. First of all, not all music is haram. Number one, it's not a black and white issue. Okay, there's genres and types of music, and the types of music, of course, have their various rulings. Okay, that I think all of us know. The other thing that I'm going to say to all of you who are music lovers, and sometimes people can't cook or study or commute without music, is be true to yourself. I think that those who know, they know that the music that I want to listen to isn't allowed in Islam. So let me ask and ask and ask until I find some guy who will sit there and tell me that, you know what, go ahead and listen to this artist and that music type. And some types of music are quite obvious. They don't have a part inside the deen. Okay, so that leaves a very, very, like obviously things like classical music, war music, like drums, for example. Okay, those kind of things are obviously nothing that the deen has any problem with. Okay, hip hop today, mainstream media today, a cappella, rap, all these things today, with a very, very negative, destructive image, for example, I think it's obvious to everybody that that type of stuff is destructive for you as a person and as a Muslim. I don't think that's up for debate. I think anybody who debates that is just searching for loopholes, with all due respect. And that leaves the middle group, which is very, very small, by the way. There's not a lot of music left in between these two sides, okay? So let's give the overall criteria. In Islam, music, or a song, quote unquote, is defined by two major components. One is the lyrics of the actual song, what the message of that song is. The second is the musical instruments used in that song, okay? If either one now is considered to be what's called lahwi, and the term is lahwi. Lahwi basically means like fuzul, like distracting, like destructive, like, I'll give examples. Then that song per se is haram, okay? So for example, you have, let's say, a cappella. A cappella doesn't have any instruments to it. 3 or 4 guys on stage, let's say, for example, singing a tune together. They're singing about things that are destructive, or that are, fluffy, if I can use the word. They're talking about love, or they're talking about, this act or that act, and stuff that that the deen doesn't really promote. Then that song, albeit no music attached to it, becomes a problem. Okay. It could be that the lyrics are great, revolutionary, talking about goodness and greatness, but it's attached to a very, very techno beat. That song becomes problematic. Okay. So for example, and this is where I get into trouble now. That's okay though. Those of you who like to hear qawalis, okay. So Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan, for example, Amjad Sabri, for example, right? You know, or the Sabri brothers, for example, you know, they talk about God, they talk about Imam Ali, they even have one on Karbala and Imam Hussein, for example, right? Great words. And up until Nusrat, for example, used just instruments that he used to use on stage, to a certain degree, it was okay. Then later on in his life, before he passed away, he became a little bit Hollywood with his qawalis. He added Hollywood music composers to it. So he would have, for example, a 5-minute instrumental intro to his qawali, which would include, like, you know, electronic guitar, drum beats, for example, you know, all those things. And then he would add a very, very catchy beat to the exact same lyrics that talk about, for example, Imam Ali being the best, or Imam Hussein, what he did on the plain of Karbala. Even though it's about Imam Hussein, it becomes problematic. Okay. Now, what type of music is it? This is where the onus now goes on the individual. The music that is considered to be made for a vain gathering, a distracting gathering, club music, mainstream radio music, stuff that you would find, let's say, for example, you know, attached to hip hop and R&B and that kind of stuff. And again, I will go back to my first point. I think those things are obvious. We just find it hard for us to detach ourselves from the actual addiction of music. Okay. We want someone to sit there and tell me that Beyonce is okay to listen to. And you know, and I know that even if, you know, just the whole image and everything of the whole genre is problematic. Okay. So what do you do now? You know, like you'll talk about nasheeds, and what about, you know, guys like, you know, Maher Zain and these guys, and you know, again, you have to look at these two components. Okay. Sometimes, you know, there's some nice nasheeds out there that have no music whatsoever and a beautiful tribute to, for example, someone's mother, for example, or the beauty of the Prophet of Allah, or the streets of Medina, for example. Those are great. Mountains of Mecca, for example, right? Guys like Zayn Bika and these guys, for example. There's nothing wrong with those things, right? But understand first the overall concept of the approach of music towards Islam. Now, a lot of you will sit there and tell me that, Malana, music is therapy used in the West. Fine. But where the negatives and the consequences outweigh heavily the positives, Islam says take the whole act out. 2 glasses of wine, for example, are quite good for you, they say. They're good to strengthen your heart. A glass of red wine is good for your heart, they say. Does that mean that Islam says, okay, up until the 2nd glass, you're fine? The 3rd glass, no, cut off at the roots. Because where is 2 glasses of wine and where is somebody getting drunk and completely being out of their elements? There's no comparison there, right? So, you know, it becomes, and yes, you know, it becomes a literally song by song discussion, artist by artist discussion. Nowadays we have these Coke studios, right? They're trying to remake all these old classical Bollywood songs into something that can be listened to by today's generation. Let's be careful of those, okay? But I think that if you truly know and you're real with yourself, you'll know that what I like and what I listen to, it's not good for me. And there's a reason why. There's a reason why Islam says not to listen to it. Go ahead, Zain, follow up. Oh, Zain, you're frozen. I think we lost Zain. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Yeah, so sorry about that.
That's okay, brother. That's all right.
Okay, just to go on to that last thing, you mentioned a study about the negative impacts of music. Do you have more detail on this? On the study?
I mean, you know, there is extensive research online talk about its negative effects on your nervous system, its negative effects on your self-image, your emotions, your moods, for example, brain waves, for example, your cognition, a lot of things, simply just Google them, the negative effects of music. Forget haram, Islam, forget the deen, just overall a scientific research. There's papers and papers and papers done on the negative effects. Everything from your ears and to your heart, to your mind, to your brain, to your emotions, to your relationships even, right? So, let's be very, very careful that we don't get swept away into this fantasy world of tulips and rose gardens and unicorns and rose petals, and really kind of face reality, right? So I would put the onus back on the person who asked. Go ahead and Google it, right? And you'll find many, many things out there. Yeah.
So we're going to switch gears here for the last two questions, I'd say.
We lost you again, Zay.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Just to switch gears for our last two questions, inshallah, for the day. Sure. Just talk about careers. So someone asked, is it necessary for children to obey the parents to choose the careers?
Is it necessary, like wajib? No, it's not wajib to listen to your parents when it comes to careers. I will say that, maybe let's not look at it through a wajib lens. Let's look at the fact that you have two people in your life who are obsessed with your success, who want to see you live a very comfortable life. Remember, these are, I'm again assuming that these are immigrant parents. They struggled to come and establish their life here. They worked odd jobs 7 days a week, so you wouldn't have to. And they don't want you to go through what they went through. This is what I believe. I could be wrong, and I'm very general, I get it. I like to think that there isn't, but there are some parents out there that are looking to, let's say, feed off of their kids when they become big doctors. I don't think that's the majority. I like to have a little bit of a good intention. I think that parents now in general just want to see their child succeed. And so, if they're pushing you towards one career path, it's for your own benefit. If you don't have the passion for it, then that's fine. I mean, it's not wajib on you to listen to them at all. But I would stop and think that, consider the source, right? This is not a friend of yours, a teacher of yours, or some, guidance counselor. No, this is a mom and a dad who have raised you, who have seen you now develop into a young individual, and who should be your biggest cheerleader and someone who wants to see you succeed. And I think that it comes from a very, very good place. We have to learn with our parents, guys, please. We have to learn with our parents to look past the tone and look at the message that they're trying to deliver. It's very, very hard. I know tone is everything, right? But rap sometimes in a very, very harsh tone is a very loving and a very encouraging and a very successful message, okay? But yeah, I know typical, you'll become a doctor. They don't do it because they want to say, oh, I have a son who's a doctor. And if they do, so what? So what if they're walking around saying, oh, my son's, doesn't that make you feel good that my dad's out there, with his pom-poms now, cheering me on? And the fact that he just wants you, or she wants you, your mom, to live a very, very carefree life. And yes, money is a huge part of it. Imam Ali says, if poverty was a man, I would have killed him. Poverty is something that affects the faith. There are people right now in this world who are looking to get a meal to eat. Forget, praying namaz shab and dua kumel. Forget all that. Can I just first get bread for my family, right? When that's taken care of, then you can focus on everything else, right? I think that's where the parents are coming from. It's not that they're trying to live their life through you. I really think that we have to change the intention of the parents. That look, they just want you to live a very simple life, and a life that's kind of free of sort of worries. And believe it or not, while money isn't everything, when you are comfortable financially, it gives you time to now do other things. Serve the community, serve mankind, focus on your family, focus on your faith, build yourself, right? But if you're worried about, for example, how am I going to pay next week's mortgage, then everything else is on pause, right? So let's have a little bit of a good intention when it comes to our parents, right? They're not they're not the enemy, right? They're in fact the only two people in the world who really want to see me succeed, right? Everyone else might have an agenda. I don't believe parents today have an agenda. There might be the occasional here and there, but the majority of them simply want us to live, a comfortable life, right? So if you're asking me in a legal perspective, shara'an, fiqhi, no, it's not wajib. But this is not a wajib issue. This is coming from people who are obsessed with your success. So maybe hear them out. If that means you push yourself and you develop a taste, let's say, for medicine, law, accounting, whatever the case may be, then so be it. But let's not think that, oh, they're trying to ruin my life and just trying to force me this and that. Stop and maybe have a positive approach. It might change things. Who knows?
Sure. Thank you so much. Our last question probably for today,
Yeah.
before we move on to closing dua, is having moved to Canada from Pakistan, there's a difference between mindset of youth and their parents. Culturally, Pakistani parents only want to marry their children into Sayyids, which is hard to do out in the West. How can this cultural pressure be tackled from a religious perspective, especially if it causes obstacles and when there's non-Sayyid potentials? What is one thing that will bring us closer to the Imam, and what will it be like when he comes back?
Yeah, and again, answers that get me in trouble and get speakers like myself who are, the younger speakers in trouble is the fact that we're just, while I understand a little bit of the importance, let's say, for example, of lineage and Sadat and Sayyid, it's not a criteria. I have, unfortunately, I continue to see individuals, parents who refuse to give their daughters, let's say, or their sons, or accept proposals from very, very great people, great family, educated, pious, successful, well-rounded, very good akhlaq, but he's not a Sayyid. And it becomes a deal breaker, and it's not a deal breaker. The Imams married non-Sayyids. Nowhere in the deen do we have a list that includes that you have to marry somebody who is from the Imam's lineage. Yes, I understand the idea of the Sadat and the Sayyid, and I do. And it would be nice, preferred, is maybe a better approach, but a deal breaker to the point where you're only gonna marry a Sayyid, it just doesn't work. It's not an Islamic approach. I'm sorry. And there are some parents right now listening to me that are going to be very fierce with me. I'm sorry. It doesn't mean that you marry whoever you want without family values. What is important is that they come from a good family. That good family is measured by how they act, not what their last name is. If they have a Sayyid last name and they're a great family, Bismillah, it's great, right? But like I said before, it can't be the fact that they have everything, but they're not Sayyid, so we're not going to do it. That is absurd, if you ask me. And you're doing your kids, and I'm sorry to use this word, an injustice by doing that. And I've seen it that, if you push too hard, then the kids take the things into their own hands, and then the matter becomes even worse. So, what the Imam wants from you is for you to choose a spouse that is God conscious, that is educated. If you're trying to choose a guy to marry, the guy is not lazy. He has a work ethic to provide for you and your children. If tomorrow, for example, you decide that I don't want to work, I want to focus on my kids and my deen, and I want to do my passion projects, he should be able now to carry the load of the house. That's what you're looking for, right? Someone who is aware of their responsibility, not someone who only has to be Sayyid. I've seen people who have said yes to proposals just because they're Sayyid, and the guy is horrible. I'm sorry. No sense of the deen. The family is nowhere near Allah, but hey, they're Sayyid, right? So you gave your daughter to a Sayyid, right? And now, what little faith she did have is gone because, so it's just, it's one of those things that make me upset. I don't understand it, the forcefulness of it, but it's not a deal breaker. Now, how do you explain it to parents? I don't know. I don't know how to explain this to parents, except for mentioning it in public sessions like this one or on the minbar in the pulpit, taking the backlash. But I do think things are changing bit by bit. I think that, again, 20 years ago, things were very, very definite that if you were a Sayyid girl, you have to marry a Sayyid guy. Now I think there's more flexibility. I like to see a little bit more of it. It's coming slowly, but I think talking about it is important. But again, it's got to come from within the parents. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Just to kind of close off this event, inshallah, the last thing I want to just ask is two things. One is that what is one thing that will bring us closer to the Imam, and what will it be like when he comes back? And the last thing is that for any of the youth that are here or any parents, is there any resources that they can use outside of this session? I know you've kind of mentioned a few different topics that you've spoken about other marjas, but if you can just give us some resources that maybe the youth can use.
Okay. So let's be quick because it's 3:20. Let's keep it simple, guys. Okay, and understand my simplicity. What is the one thing that will bring us closer to the Imam? Salat will. Salat, salat, salat. Okay. Perfect your prayer. Perfect your prayer. The timing of it, the pronunciation of it, the understanding of it, the elevation of it, everything. Everything else will begin to elevate by itself. The first place you start is salat. Be regular. And the winter time, at least in Canada, is an ideal time for that. Okay? Fajr is at 6 a.m., man. Like, literally, like Fadila time is at 6 a.m., right? So, you can pray salat at 5 p.m. Maghrib and still have the entire evening to do what you want. Okay? If you want to get close to the Imam, you cannot get close to the Imam without salat, number one. Number two, what will life be like him? Life will be extremely different from what it is now. We will actually have a sense of collectivism, harmony, a sisterhood and a brotherhood. We'll see how God envisioned life on this earth for us. Everything from economic justice to individual justice to social justice to everything. Okay, there will be people who have money to give to a beggar, and there'll be no beggars to take the money. There'll be people, let's say, for example, who will have to sneak away to do sin. Nowadays, people hide to do good. Under the Imam's time, they will hide to do sin, right? So all that we have to look forward to. Now, resources, I have a couple of them. Number one, there's a book called Jami al-Saadat, okay? The Collector of Felicities. It's a weird title, I know. Collector of Felicities. It's a good book on akhlaq, okay? I think right now what needs to be injected are two things inside of our youth. One is a stronger sense of their belief system. The second is a stronger sense of their Islamic morality. Islamic morality. Jami al-Saadat is a book on akhlaq and morality. The other one is Imam Khomeini's 40 hadith book, which talks about 40 different hadiths by the Ahlul Bayt that he has done a commentary on. Both are available online if you Google both of them, okay? In terms of our belief system, there are courses online right now. There are all sorts of things right now. There's a book by Ayatollah Wahid Khorasani called Principles of Faith. Principles of Faith. It's a good book to start off to talk about why we need religion and God and justice, etc., etc. So these three things we need to work on. When you begin to strengthen God and your moral compass, then worship doesn't become a burden anymore. It becomes a source of serenity for us, okay? So no longer are you being pulled to the musalla, you're actually running to the musalla. No longer are you sitting there, about hijab, you actually want to wear hijab, right? Homs, Hajj, etc. So it happens when those pillars of belief and of morality are nice and strong inside of you. Inshallah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Syed Asad Jafri, thank you so much for spending our time today, answering those questions. I know every time I listen to you, I always learn something new and apply it to my life. I hope the attendees who are listening today know that it's an absolute pleasure for having speakers like you spending their Sunday giving us the insights and really the resources to help guide us and to inshallah be better Muslims. So I really appreciate it.
Allah bless you. Thank you, Zain. You did a wonderful job. It's not easy to moderate these things. But thank you for your poise, your professionalism. I liked how you grouped the questions. I appreciate the fact that the GIY, the JSS, all of them, they always they give me the utmost respect, and I am always grateful and humbled by the JSS community. So may Allah protect you guys all. Please be safe. Be careful out there, please, and may Allah bless you all. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you. And just before we close off, we're just going to do a closing dua.
Sure.
But for all the attendees that did join, just so you know, inshallah, we hope to have more future Q&As like this. And hopefully if your questions weren't answered today, feel free to follow up on our social media so you can come to the next event, inshallah. So without further ado, I'm just going to go with the closing dua now.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تكونوا كالذين كفروا وقالوا لإخوانهم إذا ضربوا في الأرض أو كانوا غزا لو كانوا عندنا ما ماتوا وما قتلوا ليجعل الله ذلك حسرة في قلوبهم والله يحيي ويميت والله بما تعملون بصير. ولئن قتلتم في سبيل الله أو متم لمغفرة من الله ورحمة خير مما يجمعون. ولئن متم أو قتلتم لإلى الله تحشرون. فبما رحمة من الله لنت لهم ولو كنت فظا غليظ القلب لانفضوا من حولك فاعف عنهم واستغفر لهم وشاورهم في الأمر فإذا عزمت فتوكل على الله إن الله يحب المتوكلين. إن ينصركم الله فلا غالب لكم وإن يخذلكم فمن ذا الذي ينصركم من بعده وعلى الله فليتوكل المؤمنون. صدق الله العلي العظيم.